And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
I love space as a theme, and I love the epic space battle even more. And Twilight Imperium 3 is exactly what I'm looking for in a space game. Building a big space empire, building your technology, building your forces, using political means and fighting to get what you want. And it's a wonderful game. I said it's the definitive experience. The only downside to Twilight Imperium 3 is the time that it takes. It takes 8 hours usually, or maybe 6 if you're lucky, but it's still a good chunk of change of time. And you need 6 players to get the full experience of it. And so 6 players, 6, 7, 8 hours, that's, you're scheduling that way in advance. So when I heard about this game, Galactic Emperor, I was very excited because this game, even on the box, it mentions that it's supposed to take 90 minutes. Now that's a bit of an exaggeration. It really takes about 30 minutes per player. So if you play a 4-player game, 2 hours. Maybe 5-player game, you might be able to squash it into 2 hours too. But still, that's much shorter than Twilight Imperium. And if it gave the same kind of experience, well, hey, I'm always up for a shorter game. So my initial impressions of the game, and I played it several times now, is that I like it. It's a fun game. It's in my top 200 games. I think it's very good. But my problem is that my expectations were really high for this game, and it didn't fulfill them. I really expected it to be this spectacular game of Twilight Imperium condensed down into 2 hours. I don't know if that's possible. I think they had to strip away things to get it down in a shorter time, and I missed those things. That's not to say the game isn't good. I said it is good, so let's look at it a bit. The board itself is kind of nondescript. It's just a big space board with hexes. We'll come back to that in a minute. And as the game progresses, players will be placing planets on the board. Each of these planets provides different resources, and you get to put them where you want through various means. Basically, this game is Puerto Rico, the very popular game by Andres Seyforth, Puerto Rico in space with fighting, because players have spaceships, and some pretty cool spaceships that they're flying around conquering other planets with. Each turn, players in turn order, and turn order is determined, and turn order is determined randomly at first, but whoever has it decides which way around the table turn order is going to be. And then when it's your turn, you pick a role. For example, this is the steward role, here's the engineer role. Everybody gets to do what the role says, but the person who picks it gets a special ability. For example, the engineer allows everybody to build spaceships, but the person who picks it gets 1 free fighter. Well, that's pretty interesting, and each one of these is different. The role that I think is the most interesting is the one that allows you to use the side of the board here for resources. 3 dice are rolled, and depending on the results of those dice, you can put them on the 3 resources, food, metal, and energy, to determine the price. It's the most innovative concept of the game, and I'd like to see something more along those lines on that whole economic scale, especially as food is needed to produce the other 2. You need to use the food cubes, and yes, the game is cubes again, but you need to use these food cubes to produce energy and metal cubes that will then get you your spaceships, that will get you other things that you need during the course of the game. But the economic market's pretty interesting. There are 2 ways to capture planets all over the board. One way is the way that we all know and love, and that's through military might. Fly your ships around, conquer. Combat is done through basically just straight 6-sided die rolls. You need to get a certain number when you roll. Some spaceships are better than others. These large spaceships take 2 hits. And players have a card that explains everything pretty well. On one side it shows all the combat results and in which order the ships fire, from the huge dreadnought to the small fighter. And the other side shows the costs for spaceships and how much they cost. Because not only is there energy in the game, but there's also money, which is done in little cardboard tokens, which I think work quite well for money. So one way to conquer planets is by brute force, using spaceships. Another way, and an interesting way, is by using diplomatic means. There's a card that lets you put these diplomatic tokens out, and you can put them anywhere on the board. So you can conquer a planet that's right next to your opponent's home base, just by political means. Now, they can probably easily take it back by moving spaceships in there, but still, it keeps everyone on their toes. Some people are not going to like this. They're not going to like the fact that political power is just as powerful as military might. But I think that shows a good balance. It keeps the game interesting, and the board is very fluid. Not to mention, there's a spot in the middle of the board that becomes a black hole eventually, and when spaceships fly into that black hole, they can fly anywhere on the board. So there's no turtling in this game. Even more importantly, The game gives victory points in only 2 different ways. One way is by controlling planets, and when one of the roles is picked, people score 1 point per planet they control. The other way is you get a victory point every time you attack and win. You don't get any points if you defend and win, only by attacking and winning. So that promotes constant battle, and although battle slows the game down slightly, I still enjoy games that kick it up a notch. There's another way to score points by having your area filled with resource cubes at the end of the game, but I'm really not sure why that's there. Everyone who's played the game has agreed that that's such a hard goal to get such a minuscule amount of points, it just doesn't make any sense. But the roles picked, the spaceships flying around, the different technologies that you can buy with, there's little technologies you can buy, and when you get one of these, you control it. The fact that players are exploring planets and put them out gives it a good space feel. And yet, the game seems to lack a little bit of soul. There's no spirit in the box. Each player is the same race. There's no real difference between players. There's only 3 kinds of ships. The technologies feel a little bit generic. I just don't feel as much as if I'm in charge of an empire, as much as I'm just playing some kind of game against other players. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a good game. And yet it's just lacking that spark, that thing that says, oh, I had you on the ropes. There's no great stories to be told about the game afterwards. Is it a game that I would recommend? Yeah, I think so. Unless you're looking for that story. Unless you're looking for that American game/flavor that is in Twilight Imperium. They had to distill a lot of that to get this game as short as they did. It works well. It keeps going towards an ending. It's not as fiddly as you might think. There's lots of pieces, but there's not that many. And everything's very manageable. It goes back and forth. You don't see a weak player getting picked on that much. But there's a little bit missing. And that little bit missing is really going to determine whether you like the game or not. If you're a fan of more Euro-style games, this might be yours. There's still dice rolling, and you may not like that. But at the same time, if you're in there for those epic battles, the battles in this game are slightly less than epic. A good, but not great game is Galactic Emperor.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.